and welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us today for the first event in a three-part series focused on small business recovery across the country. Our first stop is one of my favorite cities, Philadelphia. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Wells Fargo, for making this timely event series possible. In recent months, even as businesses across the country have seen occasional opportunities for reopening with adjusting their products or workflows and safety precautions or Zoom sessions, COVID-19 has continued to disrupt business, and small businesses, particularly those owned by minorities, have continued to be hit the hardest. As the recently passed federal stimulus plan kicks into action, what opportunities are being created for existing minority-owned small businesses? And what unique challenges are these entrepreneurs facing, and how can public policy tools be deployed to best serve them? We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers to discuss these topics and more. But before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events, using the hashtag #TheHillSmallBiz, and that's B-I-Z. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, just refresh the page and that should completely fix things. Our first guest is Congresswoman Madeline Dean. The Congresswoman represents Pennsylvania's 4th District and is a member of the Financial Services Committee. Congresswoman Dean, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us for this important discussion. One of the things I'm interested in is we take the temperature of small business recovery in the country is, I'm always worried about, being too cheerleading about something happening and wondering whether it's real. What are you seeing in your district with small businesses? Is the bounce back real, or is there still a struggle going on out there that you're worried about?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm excited about the series that you're doing. And you are right to start in the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. And the reason I say that, Steve, is I don't know if you know this statistic, but according to SBA, my district has the most small business employers of any district in the country, and following that, the most small business employees. So we've been watching and taking the temperature and talking to small businesses throughout this pandemic. You're right, I serve on financial services. So immediately when the pandemic hit and the economic recession connected to it hit, what we did was starting to call. We spent weeks calling and reaching out to small businesses in my area. And what we've learned from them through the course of these 12 months, what all of us have learned is, number one, they are very thankful for the resources that have been passed over the course of the last 12 months. First, it was the America's Families First. Then it was the CARES Act, then CARES 3.5 or 2.0, whichever iteration we call it, and then the omnibus package at the end of last year. Small business after small business told us of their struggles and told us that these PPP loans, EIDL loans, and grants were very meaningful to them.
Well, I had a discussion a while back with your Secretary of Banking and Securities in the state of Pennsylvania, Richard Vague, and he told me that when those first PP loans came out, they went so fast. We burned through it very, very quickly, and that's why we needed another round. Was it your sense in that next round that the businesses that couldn't get them, and we also had a threshold for what we consider to be small business, which really didn't sound that small to me, that there were much smaller business entities that didn't have access to that first round. So did we reach many more of them the second time through?
Well, a sincere hello to Secretary Richard Vague. He is a friend and mentor to me. He's just so smart. But you're absolutely right. And you saw what we did. We came up with CARES 3.5, which added, because the money had gone, the resources had gone so quickly, and so many people missed out. We add another $310 billion in the second CARES package with greater flexibility. Because, as you know, we were learning as we were going. Fortunately, we had very good partners with the Fed, very good partners with bankers in my district. Small community bankers and large bankers, but we did face that immediate problem that the money went fast and many of the smaller folks, smaller businesses didn't get it. That's why I was also very proud to be a part of the American Rescue Plan, because that continued to recognize the need for the smallest of businesses to get resources, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. I actually have a legislative proposal that we developed early on with the help of economists that in addition to PPP, that we would come up with what we called Restore America's Main Street, so that it would be direct liquidity to the smallest of businesses, not tied to payroll, so that they would have cash to pay other things, like their mortgage or their rent or their utilities, non-payroll connected things. So I think there's still more we can do for small businesses, but I'm very proud of the tranches of relief that we have sent and how we changed and we were flexible to recognize the need on the ground.
Representative Dean, one of the things we've tried to do in our shows is to look at some of the gaps that are in society. We talk about infrastructure, we talk about the economy, talk about broadband and broadband connectivity around the country. There's a racial divide in this country, and there are different, gravity works differently across lines. And I'm interested in what we need to do from your perspective. You mentioned women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. What do we need to do to equal that out so that opportunity is not stymied on one side and provided on the other? Are we doing everything we can? I know the Biden administration has made this a priority, but part of it is how do they encourage people to move in a direction in which that, implicit discrimination is creating different outcomes for folks?
That's such an important question, Steve. And I hope in the maturation of our response to the pandemic that we are more and more attacking that problem of the inequities in our financial system. So that's something we focus on in financial services, and all of these bills, as they developed, are moving more and more in that direction. What I think will also be an important part of that puzzle and solving some of the extraordinary inequities, whether it's access to capital or environmental injustices, is the infrastructure plan, the American Jobs Plan that the Biden administration is rolling out. That I hope to be a part of. When I was a state legislator, one of the proudest votes, probably the proudest vote I ever cast, was in 2013 under then Governor Corbett and Secretary of Transportation Shoke. We passed in a bipartisan way an infrastructure bill, a paid-for infrastructure bill. We need to do that at the federal level in a robust way. And so that's what I hope we will enjoy, bipartisan support for the American Jobs Plan. It will drive more dollars to economically depressed areas, to communities of color. It will deal with the question, as you raise, of broadband. We know that in my own district, suburban Philadelphia, we have families who struggle with connectivity. We learned that when the kids had to stay home and sign up and be a part of online learning. So there's so much that is, I think, transformational in the American Jobs Plan that will begin to tackle some of these extraordinary inequities.
Let me just ask you finally, Congresswoman, one of the people I admire is Steve Case. He was the founder of America Online. He has a company in D.C., Revolution, that invests in startups all around the country. And he's been, Ron Klain, actually the White House Chief of Staff, used to work for him. But one of the, he published in The Hill this last week that we need to get beyond this notion that New York and San Francisco are the only two places in the nation where essentially venture capital money and is invested in startups, et cetera. We need to look at creating that opportunity. I know Philadelphia is a great city, but Philadelphia is also not one of those places. There are great, entrepreneurs all around this nation. And I'm just interested in the startup dimension, those people who want to take a risk, do something differently, whether there are things that the Financial Services Committee and World and the folks you work with can do to help that environment better, so we don't have talent just at a premium in two spots in this country, but we're looking at it broadly everywhere else.
Oh, what a great point. And I invite anybody to come to the 4th Congressional District. We're a very innovative, inventive group of people. We have very exciting startups or young businesses, whether they're in composite materials or patent work or all kinds of pharmaceutical work, financial services. We have a lot of very inventive folks in our area, and Philadelphia and its environment is very rich in talent. We have tremendous universities, and so what I hope is people will not see just New York and West Coast as the places to be investing and to bringing capital and to bringing opportunity. partner with some of our universities and the young people coming out of those. And it will enrich all of our communities. But Philadelphia is a really important, tempting place to come. And our suburban Philadelphia area, Montgomery County, Berks County, I give a shout out to them. As we invest in infrastructure, that's exactly what I think can happen. We can become a greater economic engine and a place of opportunity where people will want to raise their families and educate their kids and have their startup businesses.
Well, Representative Madeline Dean, Pennsylvania member of the Financial Services Committee, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you'll come back and give us a status report on some of this, but thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Joining me now is Congressman Dan Muser of Pennsylvania's 9th Congressional District. Representative Muser is a member of the Small Business Committee. He's also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access. Congressman Muser, it's great to talk to you today. And, we're talking, kind of going around the country, looking at small business, what mattered in recovery, what are some of the lag issues. I know that you have been someone who's tuned in on the economic dynamics of what's going on out there. As you look at small businesses and what matters now as we go forward, what do you think they most need?
Well, great to be with you. Certainly, we worked hand in hand with small business along the way during the COVID crisis and certainly the recovery. EPP program, although not perfect, was a tremendous lifeline for the small businesses throughout Pennsylvania, throughout the country, certainly throughout my district. Me and my team, we worked, as I said, in a very intense manner during the course of the original PPP coming out. We worked very hard as well to get PPP extensions and to just set up the initiative so as it truly worked out in the end as it was intended to do, to allow businesses to maintain their livelihoods and keep their employees with them and not have to go on the unemployment payrolls. We, as I think you know, had some real pushback from the approach of the Pennsylvania governor's office, which was quite difficult. It was there were actions taken that could have been smarter and yet maintained a high level of safety. They closed down many businesses based upon something known as life sustaining, which was difficult. So we and the small business throughout Pennsylvania had to battle through that quite a bit. We all wanted to be safe, but we needed to let livelihoods continue. And the idea of closing down Main Street, keeping all the big box stores open, well, frankly, it didn't make sense to anyone. But nevertheless, we fought through it. Our restaurants continue to suffer. Many businesses, of course, did unfortunately go out of business, but it was a fight. And I'm very glad to be on the Small Business Committee and be working on the continued PPP issues, working with the banks, but advocating for small business. In my district, 70% of those that are working, the workforce, is employed by small business. So extremely important, as well as farms. Many of our farms throughout my district are small businesses. So we're there for them too.
And they are the backbone of this economy. Another interview I did recently, in fact, yesterday, with former Secretary of the Treasury, Lawrence Summers, is that while he supports the infrastructure efforts the administration is making, he's worried that we're overheating the economy, that inflation is on the way, that we've got to put some brakes on some of the spending, and he's worried about it getting too fired up. It sounds a little bit like some of the cautionary advice that have come from your Twitter feed. Are you and Larry Summers sort of on the same page?
Well, I like on occasion being on the same page with Larry Summers. Yeah, look, I'm all for a transportation infrastructure package. I like revitalization being added to that. Frankly, we have many stressed cities throughout my district and throughout Pennsylvania and throughout America. I could use that boost. This bill is $2.3 trillion. I think we know that nearly 92% of it goes towards things that aren't described as infrastructure, certainly not anywhere near traditional infrastructure. So yes, I am for a more targeted approach. which maybe we will get, right? We are hearing the Senate bill came out, it's $800 billion. Perhaps they would for many of the green New Deal ideas and some of the non-infrastructure, now defined as infrastructure, may be part of a separate bill. We must be very, very concerned with the spend here. Yet on the same note, I'm for a T&I and our bill, but do the math breakdown. If Pennsylvania, for instance, received $15 billion, let's even call it $20 billion, work that math, we're the fifth largest state, that would equate to about a $500 to $600 billion bill for the nation. Right. Pennsylvania could issue bonds on most of that money and create a liquidity of nearly, or investments up to $70 billion. That's a game changer for Pennsylvania. So these excesses are very unfortunate because it may keep us from actually engaging in a T&I bill, quite frankly, which was not done during the Trump administration because, frankly, Speaker Pelosi and Democrat leadership didn't want to give the president that so-called win. So now we may have an opportunity, but they've taken it way too far. As Larry Summers says, spend is enormous. So we have inflationary issues, we have interest rate issues, we have currency issues, we have the dollar being the reserve issues, and then we got a little thing, which is a big thing, of taxes. And that is a huge concern, particularly for small businesses, but particularly for large corporations in Pennsylvania. So there are a lot of concerns with this Biden administration T&I plan.
Well, I was going to ask you about the tax proposals and tax bills. There's been some, discussion of estate taxes, which I know would hit a lot of small business owners. But you've also got, various looks at what the corporate tax rate ought to be. Where are you on that? Are you? We hear that some members of the Republican caucus don't mind an increase, but not to 28. Do you think there's some scale in there that works for businesses as you've seen it? And what are your broader concerns about some of the tax proposals from the president?
Well, there's a reason we got down to nearly 3% unemployment average for the nation. And it was the Tax and Jobs Act during the Trump administration was the biggest reason for it. We lowered from 35% to 21%, as you well know, the CNIT, corporate net income tax rate. The whole world got competitive. America did not. Ireland got an effective tax rate of a corporate net tax rate 12%. The UK was 20%. China, communist China, was 25%. We lowered it to 21%, with the whole idea of repatriating, bringing manufacturing back, and thriving our economy. As well, there was a 20%, actually 20% reduction for small business. Most small businesses I know, and when I do my small business town halls, tell me they were able to hire. They were able to strengthen their business. One thing liberals really don't understand is that when you lower their taxes and so-called they make more of a margin, small businesses, any business, doesn't take that money and put it in their pocket and say, I'm richer. But what they do is they invest that in their company because what they care about is long-term strength and surviving and long-term growth as opposed to short-term profits. And that's what happened. That's why unemployment was so low. That's why wages started going up. That's why our economy was booming. So I'm very, very concerned that President Biden is talking about raising CNIT up to 28%, eliminating the small business tax relief, raising capital gains to 43%, which is a killer, not on the sophisticated investor, but on those with pension plans, those with 401ks, those with regular investments, right, in the markets. So I don't know what they're doing, but it runs counter to the idea of making America economically strong. It runs counter to.
Dan, let me just ask you finally, I get the privilege of interviewing a lot of members of Congress, senators and House members. Some of them were governors, some of them were mayors, and that's a certain conversation. I interview a lot of doctors. There's a doctor caucus. But there are also members of Congress who were, ran businesses, and you were one of these. You were president of Pride Mobility Products, built it into a worldwide industry leader, CEO. Is there a different literacy about public policy and business that you and your colleagues who have that same profile have, that you want to share with others out there in this space? Sometimes this do no harm, right? The Hippocratic Oath in business. But I'm just interested, as a businessman who became a member of Congress, what are the things out there that the policy community needs to better understand?
Great question. Thank you. Taxes do matter. They're not the only thing clearly that matters, but tax is a cost. And you can have no taxes, but you must have a competitive tax rate. That's all that was done in the Tax and Jobs Act of the Trump administration. It became competitive. Chambers of Cisco, I'll never forget him saying, just make it close. We don't have to be the lowest, but we will repatriate billions and we'll bring back jobs. Apple could bring back jobs. When Steve Jobs said those jobs will never come back, not at those high level of tax rates. So it's very meaningful for subsidiaries, for C Corps, for repatriation, not just of dollars, but of the investments being made, as well from a regulatory standpoint. Many regulations, of course, were improved during the Trump years. Another reason why we had the best economy in Pennsylvania in 100 years, but in our country in 50 years. But states have to follow. I'm very concerned about where Pennsylvania is versus other states. We now have a ranking in the neighborhood of number 42 out of 50. And lo and behold, we have a CNIT state tax of 9.99%. We have other regulations that are very, very challenging for large businesses and small businesses. Yet on the same note, Texas, which is booming, and not just for businesses, but for people, that's what matters, for communities, for revenues, for their schools. You go to Texas, every town looks like King of Prussia in Pennsylvania. It looks like they're building Disneyland. And in Pennsylvania, due to the draconian outlook of liberalism, frankly, and really not understanding what drives the economy, we do not look like that, and we're not heading in that direction either. And I'll add this. I was the Secretary of Revenue for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for 4 years. The best way of raising revenue is by job creation, not by raising taxes, but by creating more taxpayers. You do the math on what a new job creates on the federal side, but also the state side. That's where your revenue comes from. That's where improvements to communities come from. That's where the schools do better. That's what quality of life advances. And by the way, that's the state that people love. Don't leave, right? Pennsylvania, as you saw in the census just yesterday, we're losing a congressional seat because people are leaving. Or our growth is far slower than other states. So I think that in itself should be the measure of how well a state is doing for its people. And Pennsylvania has fallen behind. We need the right governor in Pennsylvania to bring people back, bring business back, bring quality of life back, be competitive, and be, in fact, the next Texas.
Well, Congressman Dan Muser of Pennsylvania, really appreciate your candid thoughts today. Thanks so much for talking to us on our small business recovery tour. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
And now it's time for the Sponsor Perspective session of the program. Please welcome Della Clark, CEO of the Enterprise Center in Philadelphia, and David Myrie, Head of Consumer and Small Business Banking, Diverse Customer Segments at Wells Fargo. Take it away, David.
It's great to be here today. And Steve, thank you so much for that introduction. I want to jump right in. And Della, it's so great to be here with you and see you once again. Appreciate all the work you and Enterprise Center have been doing. As you think about where we are here today, Enterprise Center has helped roughly 8,000 small businesses and helped them to create nearly 2,000 jobs. This is an outstanding example of just how impactful CDFIs can be to small businesses in a community like Philadelphia. CDFIs like the Enterprise Center have been very key in helping small businesses throughout the pandemic. So can you talk a little bit about, Della, why it's so important for organizations like yours to support small businesses across the country?
Well, David, thank you this morning. I'm happy to have this conversation with you. I first want to start out by saying that while we're proud of our numbers and the impact we've had at the Enterprise Center, we still have more work to do. As an example, just here in Philadelphia, we have only about 1,200 businesses that have employees, and we have about 19,000 that do not. And we also represent a small percentage per 1,000 of businesses based on the population of Philadelphia. So as we look at those numbers, while we're proud of our work at the Enterprise Center, we have more work to do. And that's why CDFIs are so important, because they are well positioned to tackle these challenges as it relates to how do you bring all of the resources necessary to help small businesses succeed. CDFIs have been around. They just celebrated last year 25 years of existence. And so as we look to the next 25 years, I think the role is going to be far more important because of the challenges that we're coming out of from this pandemic, the economic downturn. And I am excited that the Enterprise Center is part of the CDFI world, and the role we can play is so important. The challenge that CDFIs have, not only in Philadelphia, but America, is that they need to have more resources in order to help their clients. So they need to bulk up their capacity, they need more dollars. And so this is why I'm excited about some of the leadership that I see coming out of institutions like yours.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Great to hear that, Della. Great to hear that.
So you ready for a question from me?
I'm ready.
All right. So working at a very large institution, we want a little inside scoop about how you are thinking about the ecosystem and the role that a large institution like Wells Fargo could play in helping to reframe the ecosystem for small businesses, not only in Philadelphia, but in America.
I appreciate that question very much, Della. You know, Wells Fargo has been deeply dedicated to small businesses and supporting them for years. And that's why when the pandemic occurred, we knew we needed to jump into action immediately. And that's why we created the Open for Business Fund, where we dedicated our $420 million of processing fees to really bring in the support to these small businesses, especially in the diverse small businesses, the micro areas where they need it most. So far, the fund has already helped an estimated 22,800 small businesses and created or helped to maintain more than 66,000 jobs, the majority of which are in diverse-owned businesses. And this Open for Business Fund is based on 3 foundational strategies. As you mentioned, access to capital is a critical issue, especially for people of color and women. And this is why the first strategy of the Open for Business Fund has been dedicated to collaborate with CDFIs to reach the smallest of small business owners with capital and emergency grants and low-cost loans. The second priority is around technical training. As many small businesses need to really rethink their business model to adjust to changing demands of the pandemic market, we wanted to help to build the capacity of these nonprofits that provide targeted small business assistance, such as business planning, financial planning, or management, as well as marketing and advertising. And the third leg is providing longer-term recovery and resiliency resources to really help small businesses in this sector prepare for long-term systemic barriers to growth and be able to accelerate and get past those barriers that they face. So this fund is truly designed to be a support system to the incredible work that small businesses and nonprofits have been doing in communities every day. And I'm really excited for this fact right here I'm going to share with you, Della. As of today, Wells Fargo is announcing over $7 million, roughly $7.5 million in philanthropic capital to bring new small businesses relief here in the Philadelphia area and the state of Pennsylvania, including, Della, get this, a $1.5 million grant to the Enterprise Center.
Yes.
So I can't wait to see how you put and make an impact and put that capital to work in the Philadelphia community with those funds, Della.
Thank you, David. And it is an honor and a significant accomplishment for us to be recognized by Wells Fargo in this initiative, Open for Business. And when we first saw the press release about it, we said, "Oh, this is big. This is really big." And we were excited to be an awardee of these funds. What's most important for us and how we're planning to use this investment from Wells Fargo is that we've come to recognize, coming out of this pandemic, we need to focus on two things. One is track record of our small businesses, and balance sheet is the second one. And so what we're planning to do is leverage this capital and identify projects where we can help our small businesses build track record with this capital, as well as improve their balance sheet, because we know without a doubt, for them to grow their business in the future, they're going to have to prove their track record, and they're going to have to prove that they have a balance sheet. And their balance sheet proves that they know how to manage their finances. So we're extremely focused on this in 2021, and we're excited about this investment because it will allow us to leverage this capital to do that.
What you talked about here, Dell, are critical components and aspects of helping small businesses to grow and thrive in and out of a pandemic, and to help them accelerate as we move forward. So I appreciate those points you brought about here today. We so much appreciate the work that you, the Enterprise Center, and other CDFIs across the country are doing to help support small businesses, especially in these diverse segment areas that need the support the most. So thank you, Della, for joining me here today. And I wish you and the Enterprise Center the best of luck as you continue doing this critical work in the Philadelphia area. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, David, before we go, I want to thank you as well. And I want to thank Wells Fargo, because it is this type of leadership at this moment in time in stepping up to help CDFIs, to help our diverse communities is so important. And it only demonstrates your commitment and willingness to help small businesses, not only in Philadelphia, but in America, succeed. And so I want to thank you and appreciate your leadership as well.
Thank you, Del. Appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you both for that discussion. That's fascinating. Our next guest is President of the Philadelphia City Council, Darrell Clark. Just yesterday, the City Council passed a $400 million neighborhood preservation initiative to address disparities magnified by COVID-19. And we've been talking a lot about those disparities, not only in places like Philadelphia, but throughout this country. This includes small business assistance, neighborhood business, corridor revitalization, and much more. President Clark, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show today. You know, we're not trying to have a rah-rah show, say, oh, you know, small business is back. We want to kind of focus in where the gaps are, what the issues are. We can take stock of the gains. But I'm always interested with someone in your kind of position. What data do you pay attention to? How do you know that in 3 months, this plan you've just passed is beginning to have some impact? What are the kinds of signs you're looking for so that we can actually say, hey, we're doing a job here. We're seeing small business and inclusive small business come back in a real way?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm traditionally a rah-rah kind of guy, but there's a certain level of reality that I like to bring to the table also.
That's good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. The simple reality is that a legislator, our most specific role in businesses is taxes. And we've had conversations about whether or not to reduce the gross receipts tax, the bird tax, the wage tax. And so what we've done, because everybody has a niche, we've tried to reduce all of our taxes, but at the end of the day, we found that the thing that makes businesses, particularly small business, successful in today's world is product, first of all, location, the ability to have access to capital. We try to make sure that that's a part of what we do in council. We've just invested a significant amount of money. You just referenced the $400 million neighborhood preservation initiative that we are actually having a vote tomorrow to put in place across the city of Philadelphia. We believe during the pandemic, where a lot of individuals and companies have gotten cautious and they've drawn back and withdrawn their approach to how we get out of this. And we've done just the opposite. We're going big, and we will be investing in commercial credits and businesses. How we measure that in the city of Philadelphia, we have quarterly tax receipts analysis done by PICA the oversight entity that's in place. And if we see those tax receipts going up, then we know we're doing okay. The whole issue with respect to employment has been a challenge for all of us. One thing I want to say though, Steve, is the city of Philadelphia has around 43% African American population, but unfortunately, we only represent around 5 to 6% of the businesses in the city of Philadelphia. Those are numbers that we are not proud of. So as we enter into this process where we're investing locally, the federal government's investing, we think we have to make some significant inroads. Prior to the pandemic, there was always a challenge with small businesses. The margins always relatively thin. And now with the advent of big boxes and Amazon and all the other Walmart's going virtual and delivering product that used to be purchased on a commercial cart, it's a challenge for them. But we're going to figure out a way to help these folks.
Let's go a step further with that. I'm so happy you surfaced that issue and you sort of talked about it. And we, on the various shows we've done here at The Hill, have been taking a deep dive in the questions around systemic racism, the divides in this country, and what we do to fix it. And I guess the unfair question I would have for you and your colleagues in the City Council, and of course we just had with us Della Clark of the Enterprise Center. We have Andrea Custis in a moment who will be coming on from the Philadelphia Urban League, who's CEO there. And I'm interested in kind of, not platitudes, but are there things that can be done to take people who are creative and innovative but never been given the chance or the capital in the ways to basically change those numbers in a real way? I know it takes time, but I'm just genuinely interested in what we do to see a narrowing of those numbers as opposed to how wide they are right now.
Yeah, well, I'm a candid person, and the reality is that too frequently people are given one opportunity to be successful. But other individuals that are in the majority community get multiple times. It's difficult to tell somebody, well, we're going to give you a shot. If you're successful, that's all well and good. But if you fail, it immediately places a level of pressure on that individual to be successful in the business. Most business startups go under. I mean, that's just the simple reality of it. But we think that the government, we referenced earlier, you talked about Della. She's done a great job. The lending institutions in the city of Philadelphia must do a much better job. We actually sued one recently for that whole level of inequity as it relates to lending practices. So we need to be aggressive. We need to make sure that the equity lens is met in a meaningful way, not just simply conversation. When the federal government finally decides on what level of infrastructure dollars come to the city of Philadelphia, along with the American Recovery Plan, we need to leverage our $400 million to make sure that the equity lens is met, to give people in neighborhoods real opportunity. I mean, this notion that a person, because they didn't have a background or a MBA from Harvard or Yale, they can't run a business. It's just not accurate. People have to be prepared to work hard. As I said earlier, they have to have a good product and they can be successful. And we're going to focus on that very aggressively to make sure that this whole equity issue is addressed in a meaningful way.
Daryl, you just gave me a great idea. Well, maybe we both have this idea together, which is if you read about Silicon Valley and these, mega zillionaires they've all failed before. I mean, they talk about their failure in their bios. In fact, Vinod Khosla, who's a very famous venture capitalist out there, actually has a conference, has had one in the past called fail.com. And these people come in and they put, maybe we should get him to come and we do a version of that in Philadelphia. And so we remove the stigma and you basically build in the fact that people get a second chance. Just an idea. I didn't know we were going to go that direction, but what you just said prompted this issue. And I think you're completely right that certain parts of American community get multiple chances at bat and others don't get that. So anyway, you just inspired me. But let me ask you, when it comes to things like the Biden administration is doing, is the quality of partnership between what's evolving at the federal government, some of these big budget initiatives that are coming in, are they going to partner well with some of the initiatives that you have in Philadelphia around infrastructure, jobs? Does that give you hope?
Absolutely. The $400 million that we referenced earlier, there are significant components. As an example, we're probably going to spend 40% of that on building affordable housing. In the infrastructure plan, they have a $300 billion wish list on the federal side, there's no way we shouldn't be able to leverage that to create the level of affordability and quality affordability in the city of Philadelphia. We have a significant shortage because right now the market is hot, but the market is hot for market rate housing. Unfortunately, again, the city of Philadelphia is number one as it relates to the most people at the level of at or below the level of poverty in our city. We're number one. Again, a designation that we're not proud of, but it is what it is. If you can give a person an affordable place to live, that gives them a platform to get appropriately trained. It gives them a platform to have the appropriate schools and education in these neighborhoods. So we look forward to the infrastructure money. We want to use some of that American recovery money. We hear about the family plan. If we get child tax credits, that will be formalized. If we get support for daycare that will allow individuals to go to training and prepare for tomorrow's jobs, we think we'll be in good shape. So I'm very excited about the prospect of utilizing that opportunity.
You and I need to spend more time together on this stuff. I'm excited by what you're sharing, but I also love your bluntness. But we've got a question from our audience from Lila Kaplan, who is grants manager of the Welcoming Center. And I must admit, I don't know where the Welcoming Center is, up in Philadelphia or somewhere, but she asked a good question. She says, if it's possible for you to address, she's interested in whether there are specific opportunities for immigrants and immigrant-owned businesses in Philadelphia, which is another dimension of the picture. How is that the immigrant, because I've been to Philadelphia a lot, and frankly, I get a sense that it's got an immigrant vibe.
Well, it actually is to some degree. There are sections in the city where there's a significant level of immigrant population and immigrant businesses. In areas in Albany, in areas in South Philadelphia, there's a significant immigrant population. Out in West Philadelphia, there's one of the community groups that's trying to form this initiative called Africa Town, where there are a whole lot of individuals from Africa and the Caribbean. They literally have stores where they're trying to build a community and give it a designation. So there's quite a bit, but again, they run into the same challenges as access to capital. And, bottom line is, I'm for what President Biden is talking about, is providing opportunity. And sometimes the opportunity is just not simply a job. It should be an opportunity for you to be an employer. So then you can hire those individuals that are out in the neighborhoods seeking opportunity. Steve, real quick, I met with a 21-year-old young man yesterday. I was so amazed at him. And he decided, he was a real smart kid. He decided after a year, he said, you know what? I don't want to go to college anymore. I'm going to open a business. And he was actually growing up in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. It's a tough little city sometimes. This kid has a cleaning business. He has 15 employees. And at the end of the meeting, I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to provide a $250,000 infusion of capital with a loan. He didn't ask for a grant to grow my business so I can hire these guys that I hang out in the street when I was growing up. I mean, that's the kind of level of enthusiasm that you want to be supportive of. And I don't think that young man should only get one chance. He should get multiple chances because he is going to be successful. I kidded him about the fact that at some point he's going to have to pay a tax based on the Biden administration's initiative for anybody over $400,000 or anybody over $1 million. He said, I'm glad to be able to pay that tax. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to be positive. I'm just optimistic. I mean, every now and then the stars align, and this may be a one-time shot for us to take advantage of all of the opportunities that are going to be presented on a federal, state, and local level.
Well, listen, when we do this again, will you bring that young man with you on the show?
I absolutely will. I mean, that kid was impressive. I mean, he actually told me, I was telling some old stories about when I was his age and what I used to do in the neighborhood. And he politely said, well, we can't keep talking about that. We need to talk about my peers and what we're going to do in the future, right? I said, all right, you got that.
It's good to be pushed. Well, Darrell Clark, President of the Philadelphia City Council, it's a real pleasure talking with you today. Thanks for joining us.
All right, my pleasure. Look forward to talking to you.
Philadelphia is a city of neighborhood business corridors, more than 100 of them. And according to the Pew Foundation, more than 21,000 small businesses are in these neighborhoods, and they make up 76% of area businesses. Small businesses is the backbone. Our next guests work and live in these neighborhoods and have directly experienced what the pandemic has done to small businesses. It's been ravaging in some cases. Some have survived, but I just don't want to, as I said a minute ago, be rah-rah. It's been tough on everybody. Jim Burnett is CEO of Vested In, formerly known as West Philadelphia Financial Services. Vested In is a CDFI, a community development financial institution, a lender to businesses and entrepreneurs in Philadelphia, as well as 6 other counties within Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. It's great to have him with us. Andrea Custis, I just mentioned, is President and CEO of the Urban League of Philadelphia, which operates an entrepreneurship center providing technical assistance, strategic planning, connection to resources to help small businesses grow. Urban leagues are in all of our major cities in America. They're really changing the game for so many folks. Sonny, I'm going to make sure I get this right, my friend. Sonny Pantafong. Is that close? Pantafong. I apologize.
That's very close, actually. That's
chef
great.
and owner of Vientiane Bistro. With her parents and sister, she has been running their popular small family restaurant since 2002. And I can't wait to get up there to try it. I'm in Philadelphia a lot. It's a real pleasure to have you on. Look, let me just start. I was talking about the Urban League just a minute ago, and as I think about CDFIs, before we get to Sonny, I'm interested in what organizations that are making loans, what organizations are out there trying to build competency and create partnerships, give people second chances. What do you need, and what do your clients need to change some of the numbers that Daryl Clark and I were just talking about? Andrea, would love to kind of get your, I love urban leagues. I've, talked to them all the time. I think there's not enough attention paid to the stories of the success stories you're doing, but I know it's been a tough time. What do your people most need in this environment?
Thank you so much for asking. And we see over 500 entrepreneurs. And when you ask them, what is the number one thing you need? There is no confusion. It is consistent across the board, and it is access to capital and access to loans. It is very difficult to be African American and to go to a bank and be able to get capital or a loan. And so that's the number one issue, whether you are small or a medium size. We deal with small and medium size. The other piece that they will tell you that has been such a struggle in general, but even it has been more emphasized since COVID-19, and that is really access to the resources that they need. When you look at the small businesses we see, it is very difficult for many of them to have the accounting systems that they need to really absolutely understand the cash flow so that they can make intelligent decisions. And so when you look at that, what you see many times is one person handling a lot of different areas that require different skills and competencies. So we need to invest and give them the help that they need. We did a lot around PPP this year. We spent a lot of time both times. In fact, we were able to get a PPP under the CARES Act and just recently. So we are experts at teaching people how to do it. Many of our Black-owned businesses were not able to do it. Want to know why? Because their taxes were not up to speed and they did not have all of the financial documents that they need. So we have to try to figure out how to have a shared model of resources so that many businesses who can't afford that by themselves can share a resource where it would be more cost effective. And so I could go on, but I will also let Jim get in there.
You want to get Jim in because he may be able to solve a little bit of the capital thing. But I would say, another dimension, what you just shared is so important that many companies may have been scrambling, may not have had all their paper, they may not have had all of that built in, and thus the system didn't allow them a gateway in. And on the front end of the PPP thing, there weren't concierges to help folks. And the other thing I learned from somebody in the state of Pennsylvania who kind of is in the economic governance area said, you know, people don't talk about it much. There are a lot of small businesses in cities that still operate often in cash. And if they're operating in cash, that's not on the books and they get excluded. So Jim, I see you nodding your head. I mean, I don't know if I'm mentioning things that should never be mentioned, but I heard this out there and I tried to tell my friends in Washington, you're missing a big chunk of American business, the way you've organized it. But tell us how you've been trying. I mean, I love the fact you used to have a radio show called There's Money Out There. So tell us a little bit about your approach to thinking about loaning, making loans and dealing with the capital sides of this economic equation.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it. I think some of the challenges that we dealt with, and you saw a lot of that exacerbated through COVID, was the fact that unfortunately, a lot of these businesses do have problems. It wasn't even the fact that they didn't have accounting system. They didn't have computers. Right. They didn't have copy machines to make copies of the tax returns that their accountants would give to them. So they couldn't submit them into the electronic documents that were required for the applications for whether it's PPP or other grants that they could have received from whether it was a city. The CDFI network, Pennsylvania CDFI network, of which Vestedin is a member, was able to bring together 17 CDFIs from across the state, 11 of which were in Philadelphia, and we delivered $250 million worth of grants. The challenge now is to take that leverage that we've created collectively and go raise additional capital for these small businesses. And so one of the initiatives in Philadelphia happens to be with the Chamber of Commerce and the local banks. And the local banks have committed to doing up to $100 million in loan funds, but it's not enough. During the grant applications that we did for the CDFI program, unfortunately, we turned down 50,000 businesses across the state of Pennsylvania. Wow. Even with $250 million in grants, because the applications that we received for over $1 billion for 60,000 businesses. So there's a huge demand. I think Andrea is exactly right. We want to make sure that these businesses are prepared, that they have the systems and processes in place, and that we work together to make that happen. There's one good story I will tell you from barbershops and salons in Philadelphia. There's a group that was created during COVID. Pennsylvania Professional Image Alliance was created, didn't exist before COVID, but these barbershops and salon owners decided that they were not going to be able to get capital on their own if they applied individually. And so they came together and have raised and helped each other fill out PPP applications, fill out the grant applications, and have done a marvelous job. And so where you had an industry that came together, it actually worked. And you've seen that similarly with restaurant industry, where they've had the lobbying ability to get resources for their particular industry. So I think it's really important for these businesses to come together and not work by themselves.
Sonny, I want to get to your wonderful story, which I've been reading about, and I am addicted to pad thai. I know the Vientiane Bistro is extremely popular, and you've done really well. But just kind of, I have an aversion to feel-good stories. Tell us about the struggle you had, and then how you see light at the end of the tunnel.
So I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for having me here. I actually want to go back to what Jim Burnett just said about getting together. I did had a lot of restaurants come together and they're like, hey, did you get the information about this loan or this grant? And it was nice to get all the small businesses together to share those information. So I can definitely agree with Jim that having these businesses get together to share information about the application, the process, the necessary paperwork that needs to be done.
And did you get loans, Sonny? Did you succeed in that process? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
We actually got the SBA small business grant. We got that, and with the city of Philadelphia, we also got the small business grant, and with the LIST program sponsored through Wells Fargo, we also got that as well.
So that has helped you get to where you are now, and you're still out there serving your clients. Definitely,
those grants and those PPP loans definitely help my business to stay afloat during pandemic.
You know, one of the things that I'm interested in, Sunny, and I'd love to get everybody's perspective. I've done a lot of interviews. Now, admittedly, a lot of the interviews I've looked at micro businesses, which are technically smaller than small businesses. They're often a single person or just a couple of people, could be a family. And that micro businesses fall beneath the radar of a lot out there, but they're incredible. You know, when you I was working with GoDaddy, which is the largest internet registration firm in the country, and they were looking at these micro ventures, tons of them in Philadelphia. But I'm just sort of looking at that level, where there's more that we should be doing. Should we be having business incubators? Should we be looking at how folks with, you know, as you're talking about barbershops and restaurants, is there a dimension where we can come in and create new opportunities and platform with e-commerce? I don't know the answer, but it seems to me that might be in the purview of Urban League or things that a CDFI has begun thinking about. But Andrea?
Yes, I love that. And in fact, if you look at I will say a large portion of Black-owned businesses, it's usually one person. There are a lot of one-person businesses in the city of Philadelphia. I'm speaking because I used to be an entrepreneur, had a with my ex, maybe that's why we're an ex, Jim and Sonny, I don't know. But I used to have a jazz club, and we also had a food business, and believe it or not, it was the two of us, and then we were able to get 3 other people to assist and help. So I think there's opportunity there for one woman, one man show, and I think that's what also is very applicable for shared services. I love the example that Jim gave. I talked to somebody lately, I think it was David Dix, who told me that story, and it makes sense. I can tell you here what we've done is we also, with the National Urban League, some of us formed a new group, just like we're talking about, that Sunny's referring to. The new name is the Black Restaurant Accelerator Program, and it's going for technical assistance and training and also grants for restaurant owners. But I think there's a great opportunity to bring community groups in, like the Urban League and other groups that can help coach and train and expose a one woman or a one man show to a lot of different skills and competencies. I mean, we help people with business plan, marketing plans. We help individuals who are starting a business, and they're usually a one person show, but those who are also doing the same thing, and we know that's insanity when you expect a different result. And so they're learning and are very open to new and different ways to do it. So we help them with new marketing plans. Usually they're doing the same thing over. We're showing them really how to use the internet better. How do you make sure that your business is up top? So there's a lot of training and development that we could do for a single owned business. And by the way, real quick, we did that with some young, I shouldn't call them young kids, but they're extremely young. They were like 18 and 19 years old. We had a little mini entrepreneurship program for them. And let me tell you, the number one thing that I found in that group was creativity and innovation. They were young. They just needed to understand how to do the business part of it. So that's the piece that we were teaching them. And they were all Black males. It was a one man show, and they really benefited from it. And it really took their business and accelerated it to a whole different level. They were like so happy and pleased because they learned.
Show and tell is always powerful. But I want to make a deal with Sunny. I need to jump to Jim in it, but I want to do a deal with Sunny. I'm a jazz addicted and food pad thai. I think we ought to get jazz, your restaurant, and Jim's friends together, and we'll have a night up in Philly.
Definitely.
But Jim, let me, on a CDFI, I really, I have a lot of friends in the financial arena, and a lot trying to do to fill these gaps and to sort of look at it. And I guess the tension that I always feel is I get someone like Sunny or hear these stories, and they're wonderful, but the truth is they're kind of boutique stories. And they're boutique stories, which is not to be negative. They're wonderful and special, and we should learn from them. How do I scale Sunny? How do I scale what you're doing with finding loans and teaching competencies? Because I talk to community after community, and I know that even our sponsor, Wells Fargo, is trying to figure this out. How do you scale connectivity with the Black and brown community that has been marginalized in a lot of the discussion? How do we scale that? And because I know that you've been in this business for a long time, I can just sort of feel it emanating. Do you have insights on what we ought to hear and the policy community ought to hear on scaling some of these initiatives?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is just ask Sunny if she wants to be scaled. There are plenty of small businesses that are fine just the way they are. They operate a restaurant, they're happy with it, they send their kids to college, and it's okay. I think with those businesses that are interested in scaling, we need to bring the resources to them that will help them to scale. And a lot of that is trying to first assess the business and seeing if it is something, or the idea in some cases, but even before it even gets to being a business, do they fit what could be scalable? Is the product or service that they're looking to deliver is something that can be scalable? And then how do we tie technology to it? But part of that is just making sure that they have the right advisors, they have a good team around them. And one of the things that we've been able to do is just build relationships. And a lot of the cases of small businesses we talk to on a regular basis who are interested in scaling, they don't know how to connect with an accelerator. So what we try to do is connect them to like a science center or University of Pennsylvania or other places where they can get the resources and build the networks that they need that leads them ultimately to the capital. I think the other piece that's really important that Councilman Clark referenced is we have to give them the opportunity to fail. And because if they only get one shot at it, then you're basically changing their entire mentality after that one chance, right? It's like all or nothing. My entire life is over and I'm 21 years old because I failed at something that other people may have failed at, and they keep going because they have more resources. We can't do that. The other thing that we need to do as investors is go into the conversation with these businesses as if they can actually be successful. Because part of the problem is we go into these conversations thinking that they're failures because they happen to be people of color. And that puts you in a totally different position from a capital standpoint where you're already adding additional risk to the equation that isn't really there. And so to the extent that we can eliminate that right off the bat, we'd be starting in a great position.
I really appreciate you mentioning it. I'm going to give the last word to you, Sunny, and ask you two things. Where is VNTN in Philly? Two, what part of town so I can get there? And then two, what else do you most need as a small business owner other than, getting off our show and getting back to work?
So we actually have two locations. I recently just opened a second one in 2018 after spending 16 years with my family. I wanted to expand the family business, so that's why I opened the second location. So the first location, which is the original, will be in the West Philly part of town. And for my location, we are in the Kensington part of town. And going back to getting the resources, the Commerce Department of Philadelphia, they were the one who actually helped me choose the business corridor of Kensington to revitalize the neighborhood. And that's where we're at right now.
Well, thank you for that. Well, let me thank all of you. Sunny Panthavong, chef and owner of VNTN Bistro, which I can't wait to get to. Andrea Custis, President and CEO of the Urban League of Philadelphia. Jim Burnett, CEO of Vested In, a CDFI actively engaged in the economic future of Philadelphia. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Our final guest today is Richard Vague, and he is Secretary of Banking and Securities for the state of Pennsylvania. He's also the author of the upcoming Illustrated Business History of the United States to be released in May 2021. I have to tell all of you about this illustrated history of business history. I've actually looked at the proofs for it. We used to do really colorful, beautiful artwork in the banknotes in history. It's going to be a great coffee book table, great Christmas present. Just want to share that. A little bit of plug for you, Secretary Vague. So Secretary Vague, let me ask you, as we've been talking about small businesses and, you're in Philadelphia, but you're also in the state capital of Pennsylvania. And I'd love to kind of take the temperature, again, not to do a rah-rah event, but, where are we in the state of small businesses in your state? Are they coming through? Are they floundering? Are you still worried that there's sinkage out there?
It's still a rough battle out there. A lot of folks are doing a lot better, but there's a lot of folks that are still fully under adverse circumstances and struggling to stay afloat, struggling to restart their businesses. So, I think we're perhaps getting a little too optimistic a little too soon. There's a lot of work left to do.
And on this, when you kind of look at the profile, you and I were talking the other day, and you said, one of the things that has not been on the radar screen of a lot of folks is there's a lot of innovation going on in small biotech. That biotech in the greater Philadelphia area is a story that hasn't been told. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think every city has to find out what its competitive advantage is. There's a lot of things that Philadelphia does that aren't necessarily better than is done in Dallas or New York or Chicago or Baltimore. So we really have to focus on what it is that can take us to the head of the pack. And in Philadelphia, without question, that is genetic engineering and biotech. Through the University of Pennsylvania primarily, but a lot of other great research institutions. There's more innovation happening here in genetic engineering, particularly around cancer, than anywhere else in the world. And historically, that's just been an academic pursuit. But what we see now is the university systems are learning how to commercialize this. So we've had a bevy, a plethora of startup biotech businesses in Philadelphia that I think are the real future of this city.
That's fascinating to hear. When you look at I know that you're a regulator of banking and securities in the state and you're looking at this, but I also think we've been hearing stories of the need for more capital, put behind businesses, sort of look at, and even our sponsor day is sort of looking at what they're doing in Black and brown communities to help, engender greater economic growth and opportunity there. But, do banks have their aperture open widely enough right now on loans, or do they have it too wide? I had Larry Summers in an interview yesterday, and he said, Steve, the economy is rocking, and we should not be juicing it more. And he's worried about some of the Biden bills coming in to really send us over the top into economically dangerous areas, which was interesting to hear. But I'd love to get your sense on the banking sector and loans to private businesses. Is it where it should be right now, or do you worry that we're getting frothy, to quote Jay Powell?
Well, I don't really worry yet about being frothy. We're not going to get the recipe just right. There's going to be some areas that are frothy and some that are continue to be problematic. So we don't have the luxury of being able to figure that out exactly because we're trying to get things done in a hurry. But there is a lot of money in the economy. The Fed the government has spent several $1 trillion. That's new money out in the economy. Banks have a lot of money to spend. I believe PNC, which is our great institution in Pittsburgh, just announced an $88 billion program for supporting a variety of things, including small businesses. So there's a lot of money out there. I think it's a matter of channeling it properly.
One of the things Daryl Clark shared up here a little bit, he said, if you are, of one part of society, and if you're white and you have it, you can have multiple chances at bat. You can fail, you'll get another chance. You can fail. He said in the black community, that's not true. That he sort of feels that one of the things that is a problem in Philadelphia with businesses is that you have uneven opportunities among that are divided by race. I'd love to get your insights into that. And as someone who thinks about policy a lot, what can we do to shift that sense of creating, another chance for people after? Because failure is part of succeeding, right? Failure is part of learning.
I think there has been a sea change, perhaps in the country, but certainly in Philadelphia. The attitude that you suggest may well have existed in the past. But I've been in banking a long time. I have never seen the kind of attitude, the kind of pro black and brown business attitude pervasively held across the banking community as it is now. I just mentioned the program at PNC. One of your earlier guests mentioned a $100 million program of this exact kind of lending by a coalition of banks here in the Philadelphia area. I'm part of a group headed up by a gentleman in town named Michael Foreman, specifically trying to energize business in the Black and brown communities through a variety of efforts, from training to lending to everything, to equity to everything in between. So I think if that existed in the past, it doesn't exist at the moment.
Fascinating. You know, I'm sure you've been watching the things that are unrolling from President Biden, you know, the American Jobs Plan, the American Recovery Act, the infrastructure bill, things around this. Do you think Pennsylvania is aligned well for these initiatives coming out of the federal government, or there are blind spots, policy blind spots that you want to warn Washington policymakers to be wary of?
You know, I don't want to warn Washington because, you know, in my opinion, and I think you and others have far more insight than I do, I think the response of the Federal Reserve Bank has been historic. I think the initiative to support the economy since the pandemic began were unimaginable a year and a half ago. I think what's been done has been magnificent. And I will tell you, you know, I have insight into the state and municipal budgets and a lot of businesses around town. There's a lot of money. So I'm not going to tell Washington anything one way or the other in terms of curbing their enthusiasm. But I will say there is an enormous amount of work in channeling this money properly. Anytime a system deploys something this large, this rapidly, there's a lot of opportunity for fraud, corruption, misallocation of resources. That certain amount of that's inevitable. So that's the real challenge, I think, in front of us right now.
Let me just finally, Richard, ask you to take your Secretary of Banking hat off for a moment and put your author about economic disasters hat on. And, you know, I want to tell our audience he's written many books, but one of them is called A Brief History of Doom, a chronicle of major world financial crises. And also another book, The Next Economic Disaster, which essentially saw much of what was coming undone in China at that time coming undone. I'm just sort of interested, you know, given the calipers and the data that you look at, and I know you have gone back and done a lot of research on debt, private sector debt, public debt, and looked at the behavior of economies all around the world and through history. And I'm just interested, as you look at the United States today, you know, how would you grade us in terms of economic risk in the aggregate? Are we in good shape? Are we in bad shape? How you know, what would you share with us given your expertise in this area?
We watch this very, very closely, as you might imagine. I think we're in okay shape. Shape, given all the pain. I think we got a lot of work to get ourselves all the way out of that pain. But compared to where we could have been, we're in good shape. And I do not think, except for little pockets here and there, I don't think we're at risk of speculative buildups that are excessive of the type that we experienced in the mid to late 1980s and in 2008. So we'll have problems here and there. Generally speaking, I think we're in pretty good shape.
When is your book going to be out, the banknote book? And what's it called?
Well, it's, you know, frankly, any day now. We understand it's on the way to the warehouse. So,
wow.
I'll get you a copy as soon as I get one.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, Richard Vague, Secretary of Banking and Securities for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts.
Can I say thanks to you and to Wells Fargo? It's great of you guys to be doing such important work.
Richard, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. A big thank you, as Richard just said, to Wells Fargo for its support of the program and to all of you in the audience for joining us. For those of you who missed these cool conversations, you can go up to our video on our website shortly and watch them many, many times over, share them with your friends, etc. I'm Steve Clements. Have a great day. Be well.